Welcome back to the Titanium Hanger. This is Mike. Happy Friday, everybody. Hope everybody is doing well this week. Today I want to talk to you about diecast in Masterpiece. And it's one of those topics that kind of comes and goes. People agree on or disagree on. But the one thing you can agree on is if it has no diecast or if it has diecast. But we're going to talk about the benefits, the positives, and then the negatives of it. And of course, this all starts to come up mostly because we've seen the most recent Fans Toys release have little to no diecast in it. Obviously, for obvious reasons why I'm perfectly fine with it. But does it make it lesser of a bot in bot mode than the other ones? We'll talk about that. But before we get into talking about is diecast good or bad, I want to know what G2 repaints or just G2 figures that you ended up picking up or you like, or what's good or even what's out there G2, because I do want to compile a G2 video because I only have a couple of G2 Masterpiece figures, but with the bright colors and all that kind of fun stuff, I think it would be a fun video to make. Again, I've touched briefly on it, but anyway, let's get into talking about diecast, good or bad, coming up. So I'm going to say when I'm talking about diecast in figures, there's really two companies to talk about, but I'm going to kind of say why I'm not really going to talk a lot about these other ones. MMC, when I brought up Sphinx, didn't have any. Some people pointed out it does have some diecast, I think maybe the chest or something, but it doesn't have a lot. It's very little used in there. I know their cassettes don't have any. The screws are metal, but you know, with that, MMC doesn't do a lot of diecast. If they do, it's very little, very minimal. Unique Toys, DX9, a lot of these third-party companies, they don't use a lot of diecast in theirs, and that gets the price down. They can put their figures out cheaper, and I have to admit, I don't have a problem with it. If I'm buying a figure in the $60 or $80 range that would cost me $150 to $200 for Fans Toys, but it doesn't have the diecast and it doesn't have the level of paint. I mean, I understand what I'm buying. I'm okay with it. Some of these ones that don't have the diecast and have less paint are budget options. And when it comes to Takara used to, I think these days are over, but Takara used to set the trends that everybody else followed. I don't think everybody's going to jump on an MPG wagon, whatever that is, but I still think this is the best looking, most accurate hoist, but it's light as a feather. It is very light, and it's the one I have in my main display. It's the one I prefer the most, but in hand, because it's so light, it doesn't feel quite as quality as the Fans Toys, but we're going to get into that feel. Takara got away from diecast pretty quick, when the the car bots, just a lot of their releases early on, you started seeing less and less diecast. In fact, as early as, was it Grimlock? And then we had the MP09, the Rodimus, and then we had Soundwave. And their Soundwave just had diecast feet. You know, for a while there, I was wondering where's all the diecast going, because if you pick up the MP01, that thing is almost all diecast. It is heavy duty, but nowadays, no diecast. And this is a trend that they've started, but not everybody followed. Now, I'm going to say Fans Toys is known for using a large amount of diecast and a large amount of paint. And it's almost like they want to show how much diecast they can put in a figure and how much paint they can put on a figure. And at the end of the day, that's why it looks premium, feels premium. Also the design. Sometimes you could even argue that a Fans Toys figure design, as in the argument with, say, right here with the Hoodlum. It's a hefty duty, heavy figure. I still think it looks better than Takara, but a lot of people would say Hoodlum is bad because of the paint shipping and all those kinds of things, which we will get into here in a little bit, and the articulation of it. So design-wise, maybe it's not the greatest, but if you look at the Masterpiece market, as a hot rod, it's the most sought-after hot rod in the Masterpiece market. And some would also argue RC, and there's a lot of great RC options out there, but people would also argue that's the most sought-after RC. Just got a lot of diecast. And I don't think it's a very good design. I don't think their RC is a good design. Fans Toys really did spoil us with all of their figures having a certain level of diecast in it. And along with that, if it's made, a part's made of diecast, that part has to be painted, or it's just going to be silver. You can't dye the die cast. And when I first got my hands on this Phoenix, I expect it to be really heavy. It's still got a weight behind it. It definitely has a presence. It's a great figure, but it feels lighter than I expected. And I was surprised the lack of diecast that they put into that figure after spoiling us for so long, and still they come along and spoil us. So that was like my first surprise when I saw no diecast or lack of diecast. You see, the thing is that even their mini bots have diecast, and it's not just the design, it's not just the paint, it's not just the diecast, but when you put the combination together with diecast parts, a hefty weight to it, and you've got the clickety ratchets in some cases, and you have a very well painted, hefty figure, it just feels way more premium than the competition that's out there. And that's all there is to it. I remember there was a time that it doesn't really feel that long ago, but it was more like 2016. How long ago was it that Arcos came out? He was like $60. I said, nah, I'll pass. And then it was, I guess my main goal in life to get a hold of an Arcos for less than $150, because it was the best one on the market at the time. It was at least 7 years before Fans Toys put theirs out, or 6 years before Fans Toys put theirs out. And I remember wanting to get my hands on this really bad, but now that I have them side by side, I like the Fans Toys more. The X Transbots doesn't have any diecast, and I don't really think it's painted very well. It's like shiny plastic, but it doesn't have a whole lot of paint on it, as opposed to, say, Fans Toys with their paint. And of course, they even flaunt it and show off the level of diecast in their figures that Fans Toys does, and it does win in this case. I'd argue most of the mini bots, that's not a great picture, but most of the mini bots that X Transbots makes has little to no diecast in it. But when Fans Toys comes out making theirs, they're saying, we're going to change the game. We're going to change the game. And they did. There's a lot of diecast in there. There was, like, Ollie doesn't have much diecast, but there's another third-party one, which I keep forgetting the name of it, even though I looked it up not too long ago. But that one's full of diecast, too. That one feels more quality because of the diecast. So we get into the feel of quality when it comes to diecast, and I got to admit that the 1.0 X Transbots Cup, they call it Locke, L-O-C-K-E, that one it was a bad QC figure, but it felt good in hand just in bot mode. If you just had it as an action figure, you didn't transform it, it felt good because it had the diecast and it had quite a bit of paint on it. This is when they really started turning the corner with getting some paint. And then, of course, they really went full on with their premium, starting with their Springer. Because their Springer was actually called the Premium Paint Job. This one actually wasn't called the Premium Paint Job. But getting into it, though, the 2.0 of this is fine, and everything works fine on it for mine. I didn't have a problem with it. But you always hear that old argument that diecast doesn't equal quality. And I agree that. I agree, just because it has diecast doesn't mean it has quality. Doesn't mean it's a great figure, but it does feel better in hand, and it can make your figure stronger in some points as long as it's not diecast against diecast, and the other pieces that connect to it can support the weight and can handle it. We've seen several home run figures from X Transbots full of diecast and heft and full of premium paint, like their Perceptor here. This Jansen figure is a great figure, and again, I mean, it's the old Perceptor war kind of is over. I guess it's in the past, but it looks fantastic. It feels fantastic. I just went and picked it up and felt all the diecast in it. So there's diecast all over this thing, and it is a hefty, heavy figure. Looks great. The Omnibots all have diecast in them. I even think there's more diecast in the Omnibots than there is in, like, the Punch Counterpunch. I have a belief that the Punch Counterpunch had more sort of moving parts to it than this one, than the Fioravante. Now, I did have people report they did have breakage with their Fioravante. I did not. I haven't really broken X Transbots in a while. And I have to say that when I transformed this, when I got this, I just felt like it was a premium figure. I did feel like it was delicate in places, though. That was due to thin plastic. But I feel like its quality and heft due to the diecast and the paint, it's worth it. Now, talking about these, the reason that people are a little off-put about the Viper, it doesn't have any diecast, I feel like it's a 50-50 split in the community. I think on the comments, it's like 70% of people are perfectly fine and happy that it has little to no die-cast in it, because it's going to be an arm and it's going to have to support it. So that's the big old discussion here. But we can assume Jester's going to come exactly the exact same level of die-cast, or lack thereof die-cast. And when you look at all of this, I think it's fine. But how does it stack up next to the rest of the figures? Well, here's the thing. Design-wise, they have a plus and a minus when you look at the design-wise. Like, I'm not a big fan of the wing on the leg there, which only really is for the Viper, the Jester. It's all on the backpack. But when you look at the backpack made more or less properly, so it's a better design. But when I pick up the other figures and move them around, they just feel like they have more heft to them. I mean, I'm specifically Goose. When I grabbed the Goose and then I grabbed this one and I'm setting them up for comparisons, I just felt like the Goose had a lot more die-cast in it, and it felt a little bit more premium. But at the end of the day, I'm fine with it as a team, even if I don't combine them, because I understand why they did it. And yes, this is an example of how one feels a little more premium than the other because of the die-cast. So I will say this, and I'm not really sure if I covered it in my review of this figure, but when you have it in jet mode, all of the parts are just so compacted in there that it feels like a really heavy, long cylinder for the most part, with a couple of thin wings hanging off of it, because it's so compact in there. The way they did it, everything, there's like no air or empty space inside that cylinder kind of thing for the plane. The fuselage, but it feels very hefty, almost as if it's got die-cast in it. It's so hefty because the plastic they use, the quality is good, heavy-duty plastic. It is solid, and it's just a lot of weight because there's a lot of parts, and it's a big bot. So maybe it's just my point of view, or just the fact that it doesn't seem like it should be as heavy as it is because it's so long. But I did kind of have that feeling. So I was wondering, like, how heavy would this sucker be with die-cast in it? I mean, it would be too heavy to be an arm. And I'm not going to pull out any Minosaur pictures and all that kind of stuff, but I kind of feel like their Minosaur is a different ball game because there's an exoskeleton associated with it too. So it's a different type of combiner than what we're getting with this, even though it's 5 figures and they're using faux parts and all of that. But in this, it's the entire arm is going to be that figure, and it's gonna have to support itself, and the whole figure's gonna have to support itself. So it is what it is. Let's move on. Now let's get into the downside of die-cast. Paint chipping is a problem. I've chipped some paint on some Fans Toys figures, and even in the video, and it just drives me nuts. But the one that just comes to my mind the fastest is the huge hissy everyone was in that this figure, the Hoodlum, shipped, and the car mode, the hood in the car mode was already chipped because it's kind of a faux hood, and the way it's tucked in there, and it's just almost impossible to transform it and not have that chipping on the front of the hood. And a lot of people were upset about that. I'm sure someone out there, or people out there, were able to have finagled it and made it happen, but it's like a 85% chance that you are going to have chipping on that hood in alt mode. I never transformed mine, so I don't know. And I know that Fans Toys does a lot of things nowadays, which I don't think they did back then, like put little thin sheets of paper, some kind of that wrapping paper kind of stuff in there to keep it from rubbing against itself in shipping. And those are a couple of things they've done, but it's a design issue. It's a design flaw. But with that, I mean, you do get paint chipping with die-cast. Sometimes parts need to have a little bit of flexibility to them. Die-cast has no flexibility. And if the engineering isn't absolutely precise and perfect, the die-cast could be a problem. It could be a problem. I don't know that I could attribute any issues with this figure to die-cast being the problem. But it was engineering and a few other things, designs, that just minor little issues with it. But you can see die-cast could cause issues because of lack of flexibility and the connection points. And you can see breakage of other parts because they're connected to die-cast and they're not made strong enough, or they're made too thin. And a lot of Masterpiece panels are extremely thin. And of course, we've already covered the weight of these items. So the last one I really want to talk about, and this is something that somebody else brought up to me a while back, and of course I don't 100% know the truth on this one, but this is stuff thrown out there that if a mold is made and die-cast is used, the mold doesn't hold up as long. You can't use it for as many pours as hot plastic. Now that makes a lot of sense to me, but it may not actually be the truth, but it does seem to make sense, and it does seem, when you look at Fans Toys has multiple molds they can't use anymore, and they use a ton of die-cast in their stuff, I kind of think that makes a lot of sense, but Make Toys, on the other hand, has used this mold to infinity and seems to have no trouble with it whatsoever, right? So what do you guys think about this die-cast situation? Do you prefer having die-cast in your figures? Do you prefer not having die-cast, them being lighter weight? Does it matter to you one way or another? And also, chime in on the old G2. What's your favorite G2 masterpiece figure that you've picked up or would like to pick up, or what else is out there? Just throw it out there. Hey, I'd love to have this. Love to have the G2 Minosaur from DX9. Anyway, let me know in the comments below. Like, subscribe. Petty Hanger out.